Welcome home, everybody. This is Native Land Pod. I'm your host, Angela Rye. I am with you all today to talk about some really important pressing issues. I wanted to spend a little time talking to folks in my community about our posture around immigration. We are witnessing people being deported in public spectacles. People are being arrested and put on buses, put on planes, deported to places that they did not once call home. One of the most recent examples is about a man named Kilmar Abrego Garcia. And this man was deported. Nobody knew what happened or why. He was said to have been a gang member. And the Trump administration is fighting to prevent him from being brought back from from an El Salvador prison. And the kinds of things that they're saying in response to the Supreme Court ruling around Kilmar Abrego Garcia's return to the United States is insane. There's a court document that was filed. This is the defendant's response to plaintiff's motion for additional relief. And one of the things that is listed here is that is they say that the court should deny the plaintiff's request. The plaintiff would be Kilmar Abrego Garcia for further relief because the relief is inconsistent with the Supreme Court's instruction requiring this court to respect the president's Article 2 authority to manage foreign policy. So they are making the claim that you can deport someone on U.S. soil who has not done any of the things that you allege. You wrongfully targeted him. You wrongfully deport him, but he should stay in custody in El Salvador, and he should not be returned because it is an affront to the president's foreign policy powers. You all, if there was ever a time to think back to the podcast where we talked about the constitutional crisis that is upon us, the constitutional crisis that we are now living in. This is now. That is what is happening right now. It's not a court decision away. They got to the Supreme Court, and the president and his cronies are testing whether or not they could actually overrule the Supreme Court. They don't have to comply. And this is what happens when you put someone in the White House who was alleged to have 91 felonies. When you get a crook, you get crook behavior. So you're curious about why someone with all of these alleged, we have to say alleged because they're litigious, even though they don't follow court orders, but alleged felonies, why they would break the law. Why do you think a felon gonna break the law? Like, we have to buy into the fact that when someone shows us who they are, we've got to believe them. So that's the first thing I want to put on your radar. The second thing I want to put on your radar is Mohsen Madawi. Mohsen Madawi is an organizer, a pro-Palestinian organizer who supported demonstrations last year at Columbia University, according to the New York Times. He was detained on Monday. He was detained while at an immigration meeting to secure his citizenship. This man has been a resident of Vermont for 10 years. While he was at his citizenship meeting, he was arrested or detained by ICE, right? This is the kind of new world we're living in. This is Mohsen Madawi again. His mothers, his lawyers, his sister, nobody could find him after he was detained in Colchester, Vermont. His lawyers requested a TRO, which is a temporary restraining order, to prevent this government, if that's what we're going to call this thing, this fascist regime, from sending him anywhere. And here's the thing. I want us to examine why this is so problematic. A lot of us in my community believe that an immigration problem is not our collective problem. That could not be further from the truth, because at some point or another, these folks are going to come knocking at your door. Let's roll the clip of the immigration attorney this happened to.
They don't really care who they're trying to deport or ask to leave the United States. When Massachusetts resident Nicole Micheloni received this email on Friday telling her to leave the country, she was baffled.
At first I thought it was for a client, but I looked really closely and the only name on the email was mine. It said that my parole status had been terminated and I should leave the country within 7 days.
But the 40-year-old is a U.S. citizen.
I think it's most likely a mistake, and they're just casting a really wide net. But it's a little concerning that these are going out to U.S. citizens.
Micheloni is an immigration attorney working with many clients facing possible deportation issues, so her name and email are on a lot of paperwork. In a statement, a senior Department of Homeland Security official told us Customs and Border Protection is issuing notices terminating parole for individuals who do not have lawful status to remain. If a non-personal email, such as an American citizen contact, was provided by the alien, notices may have been sent to unintended recipients.
I think it's really scary that this is going on. It says that they're not being very careful. I think it's a scare tactic. I think they want people afraid of immigration.
Yeah, so here's the thing. And Nicole, I want to just acknowledge you and thank you for your courageous work in this time. It's a really dangerous, challenging, overwhelming time to be in immigration law. So, Nicole, who is based in Boston, received an email that says, "It is time for you to leave the United States. If you do not depart the United States immediately, you will be subject to potential law enforcement actions that will result in your removal from the United States." Let me tell you all why this is a problem to me. I was recently on a television program and I said some things that people did not like. Their immediate response to me on social media platforms, particularly on Twitter, was, "If I hate it here so much, I should leave." Right? And so anyone who is working to protect people's First Amendment rights or their 14th Amendment protections or their Second Amendment rights or their Fifth Amendment rights, anyone who is opposed to what this administration is putting forth is being threatened. Normally, those threats come from Twitter trolls. Now, the Twitter trolls have taken residence in the Trump administration. That is what we're dealing with. So, why I started where I started with the two people who have, for all intents and purposes, been disappeared, the many other folks who we've seen be detained, regardless of their background, Palestinian or Arab American, someone who is a Latino, right? At some point, Black folks, white folks, it's going to come knocking at your door. Nicole is an example of that. Sure, they can say it was a mistake. But we all would be foolish if we don't believe that this scare tactic is by design. And it's something that we've got to be paying attention to. When you get an email that says you should immediately leave the country where the only country that you've known to call home, not only is that scary and intimidating, I don't think it's by mistake that they would have sent it to an immigration attorney. So now I want to just tell you about why I think we have to tap into our humanity in this moment. I'm sure there are people at home who are watching who are saying, I would love to care about what's happening in immigration, but I'm just trying to make ends meet. I just am trying to make sure I have enough money to pay my light bill. I'm just trying to make sure I can afford these expensive ass eggs. I'm just trying to make sure I can buy gas for my car. I'm just trying to make sure I can buy clothes for my kids. I'm just trying to make sure I can pay my tithes at my church. Whatever your set of circumstances are, there is something that binds us all together. There's blood that runs through our veins, right? We wake up in the morning, we blink. Hopefully, we can move our fingers if we have the activity of our limbs. We can hear if we have the ability to hear, smell, see, taste, if we have those abilities. But if we are breathing, whether it's by an assisted device or not, humanity. That is the common thing that binds us all together. In this moment where people are feeling attacked on every side, we've got to lead with our humanity. We've got to lead with our humanity because the moment we prefer ourselves over someone else, the moment their struggle, their trial, their issue doesn't matter to us, we are essentially doing the same thing that I don't know if you all have ever seen someone trip and fall, right? Just let's say you're outside and you see someone trip and fall. Imagine the number of people that stop to say, "Hey, are you okay? Can I help you up? Is there anything you need?" Versus the person that just walks by. And I'm thinking about the parable in the Bible of the Good Samaritan, right? The person that just walks by. And then finally, there's that one person that stops to say, "Are you okay?" We have to be in an era, even with fascism in the White House, we've got to be in an era where we stop to say, "But are you okay? What do you need? How can I help?" If you're too busy, if you're too overwhelmed to just say, "Are you okay?" We've got we got to redo some things, because we cannot leave our humanity at the door when people are suffering like this, because how would we want someone to show up for us? I think my trauma response in this life is often overperforming and doing because I just want somebody to do that for me. I want to make sure that in my darkest moment and my most challenging time, I'm not by myself, that I can stand together with other human beings who have the same need or a different one to pitch in and say, "Are you okay?" or "How can I help?" So I'm telling you all this. I'm starting to tear up because I'm thinking about these images. I want to put up the images from the El Salvadoran prison so we can look at something that looks very familiar to that in history. If we can put that image up. There's an image of men being brought into prison, being tied, their hands being tied behind their backs, their legs overlapping with one another, their faces in mass, with their faces buried into the small of their back of their neighbor. And there are rows and rows and rows of these men whose heads have been shaved. And it reminds me of something very, very traumatic in my own ancestry. And that is the image of people who were forced out of their homes, snatched from their loved ones, from the continent, the motherland, Africa. And so when you look at this image of the belly of a slave ship, and you think about the image of these men who are shackled together the same way our ancestors were shackled together, when we say never again, that never again can't just be about Black people. That never again has to be about all people. Nobody deserves to be treated like that. Nobody. And so I would ask us to dig deep, to think about what we need to be able to lean into these moments, to stretch ourselves, to be there for our neighbors, the one who helps us to check out our groceries at the grocery store, the one who sits next to us in our places of worship, the one who teaches in our classrooms for our K through 12 students, or the ones who might be the teacher's assistant at our college with our favorite professor. I want us to think about the elder who's taking care of his aging wife. I want us to think about the cancer patient that wouldn't have access to resources if we don't lean into our humanity. Y'all, we got to do different. We know better. We cannot turn a blind eye to this crisis. I don't care who you voted for. You know this is not right. And for the church leaders who continue to amplify this man and pray for this man and lift him up. I'm not saying pray for his mental health and his state of mind. Like, please pray for that, right? Please pray that God visits him in his sleep and does not let him rest until he does right by humanity. That should be the prayer. But I just would ask our church leaders to think about the Bible you read and the God you serve. And if this is really it, right? When you think about, for those who are red letter Christians, you got the red letter Bible, the King James Version or the New King James Version or whatever, you have the red letters because you need to know for a fact what Jesus said in the New Testament. I want you to find the places where Jesus ever recommended behavior like this. Or do you think about the prayer of the Beatitudes where he talks about how we should treat our neighbor, how we should love our neighbor, how we should visit the sick and feed the hungry, right? That is the God I know. And so this version of God, I don't recognize. If you're telling me that this is Christianity embodied in the federal government, I don't know that Christianity. That's not the Christianity that I'm a part of. That's the Christianity of overseers and plantation owners and enslavers. But that's not the Christianity that I ascribe to. So with that, I want to just show you what happens when you elect someone who is an aspiring dictator and how they talk to someone who is an abusive dictator. This is what happened just the other day when Donald Trump met with El Salvador's president, Nayib Bukele, and they met in the Oval Office. And I want you to hear what Donald Trump has to say about homegrowns.
I'd like to go a step further. I mean, I said it to Pam. I don't know what the laws are. We always have to obey the laws, but we also have homegrown criminals that push people into subways, that hit elderly ladies on the back of the head with a baseball bat when they're not looking, that are absolute monsters. I'd like to include them in the group of people to get them out of the country.
I'd like to include them in getting them out of the country. There's another clip where Donald Trump is on a hot mic. If we have time to pull it, I think it would be good. A hot mic talking to Nayib Bukele. And he says that he needs to build more prisons. Trump tells Bukele he needs to build more prisons in El Salvador because they have more people, the homegrowns, who they want to deport. Now, I want to tell you all that troubles me. I don't know if any of you all at home have people who are in your family or loved ones or friends who are incarcerated, but I do. And when I think about who he could be calling the homegrowns, with as broad an umbrella as that might be, as big as of a tent as that might be, our people are in direct harm's way. So while you turn a blind eye to this because immigration isn't your problem, or they're taking your jobs, or they're creating all this violent upheaval in your community, where you really can't point to that as a fact completely. I'm not saying there aren't micro levels of examples of that, but as state governments are impacted because they no longer have those taxpayer dollars to rely upon, or the federal government is impacted because they no longer have those dollars to rely upon, as your homes may not be cleaned anymore, your hotel rooms may not be cleaned anymore, there's no one to pick ripe fruit or vegetables, or there's no one to help finish a construction project, or there's no one to help finish computer code for the latest AI development. I want you to think about this moment. I want you to think about the times where you turned a blind eye because your load was heavy, or because you don't care, or because there's somebody you got to be mad at. This is the moment where we have to call up on our humanity and do the right thing, even if it's hard. That is what is required of us. So I'm asking you all to lean into your heart space and to learn about these people, Kilmar Abrego Garcia, who the Trump administration is blatantly defying the Supreme Court order for, to leave him in El Salvador. I want you to think about Mohsen Madawi, who was getting his citizenship, actively sitting there right in that moment to get his citizenship. I want you to think about everybody else who white America might be afraid of and call them homegrowns, and decide that that's reason enough to deport him or her, or these folks, right? I want you to think about Trayvon Martin, who was shot and killed by a vigilante, George Zimmerman, because he would have been deemed a homegrown, or Alton Sterling, or a George Floyd, or a Breonna Taylor, because they would have been deemed inadequately, inappropriately, and wrongfully as homegrowns. These are the people who, if they were alive to tell it, or Ahmaud Arbery, if they were alive to tell it, because they're relying on citizen tips, not fact checking these things, not ensuring that they have the right person before they deport them. If they look like a criminal, if they look like an immigrant, if they have a bad tattoo, or a tattoo they decide is bad, then these are the people that have to go. Is that what you want to be associated with? Not for me. I want this country to turn a page. It's time to turn the page on history and stop being so proud of and endorsing this country's racist, evil, ugly, treacherous past. And by not embracing it, I'm not talking about erasing history books or getting rid of museums or banning books. I'm talking about not repeating the same mistakes. And so when you look at this picture of these men in an El Salvadorian prison, and when you look at this picture of these people on a slave ship, and it doesn't look any different, challenge yourself to say, this can't happen in the United States and it can't happen anywhere else. Challenge yourself to say, even if I don't know this person, I know they don't deserve this. Challenge us to do and be better. That's what time we're on right now. Welcome home, y'all. Native Land Pod is a production of iHeart Radio in partnership with Reason Choice Media. For more podcasts from iHeart Radio, visit the iHeart Radio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.